Meridian. When terrorists carpet bomb an Earth Alliance colony, killing thousands, the military must bring the perpetrators to justice. Strangers thrown together by circumstance, amidst a difficult mission, nobody expects Lieutenants David Solovy and Richard Navick to be heroes. In fact, their commanding officers would prefer they stay out of the way and out of trouble. But when the mission to bring the One World Separatists terrorist group to justice goes sideways, they must take matters into their own hands if they want to save the day, get the bad guys, and live to tell the tale. Set nearly half a century before STARSHINE, Aurora Rising Book One, Aurora Rhapsody No. 1, Meridian is the unlikely story of how one of the greatest friendships of Aurora Rhapsody came to be. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Carl Jung. 2280, 42 years before the events of STARSHINE. AFS Brisbane. Space, Southeast Quadrant, Earth Alliance territory. Clouds the color of molded moss rolled across the sky like thunderheads of a squall line, yet driven by some unnatural force. Scattered glimpses of the surface soon disappeared beneath the churning storm as it devoured the horizon. Lieutenant David Solovy was hurrying through the break room when the dramatic scene caught his attention. He stopped in the middle of the room to stare at the news feed. These visuals are coming to us from satellites orbiting New Marrakesh, following a series of explosions in the skies above the colony's largest settlement. They are minutes old, and the situation appears to be in flux. We've thus far been able to establish reliable communications with officials on the ground. New Marrakesh was a third-wave colony, founded a decade earlier, small but growing fast. Quirky, in honor of its namesake, or so he had heard. Someone jostled David's shoulder and he glanced over to see the room filling up with Marines eager to crowd in around the wall screens. The scattered murmurs were uncharacteristically hushed, however. No one wanted to drown out the reporters. We've received a communication relating to the events on New Marrakesh. It purports to originate from the One World Separatists terrorist group. Not them again. The bombastic group of thugs, bearing the head-scratching title, had been flooding Exenet interest spheres with propaganda for weeks now. Their screeds quoted everyone from Plato to Mao Zedong to rationalize their philosophy of, well, no one was really sure, other than it included an irrational hatred of the Earth Alliance government. The communication states the following: "The Earth Alliance was warned. You were all warned. The universe belongs to all and none, and it will not be debased by the filthy, clamoring hands of Alliance usurpers. Their contamination must be cleansed from the universe. It tried to spread to the formerly pure world you called New Marrakesh, but it will spread no farther. New Marrakesh is being cleansed, but it is only the first. The line is drawn here today. World by world, we will reclaim the universe in the name of all and none." Bloody psychos. Troy Mendoza, a second lieutenant in David's regiment, gestured dismissively in the direction of the screens. "Point me to their hole in the ground and I'll show 'em what cleansing looks like." David muttered a vague commiseration, if only to shut the kid up. His zeal was commendable, but he was young and hadn't earned his boasting. David's brow furrowed in growing concern as he took to the continuous stream of worsening visuals. What had the terrorist unleashed? The death toll on New Marrakesh had surpassed 64,000 when military intelligence located the One World Separatists headquarters. No more than 109,000 people were on New Marrakesh the day of the attack, so the trend didn't bode well for the balance. 80 aerial dispersal bombs had detonated, an insidious, home-brewed chemical radioactive mixture in the lower atmosphere of the planet, where New Marrakesh's notoriously turbulent weather patterns were primed to pick it up, thus increasing the poison's destructiveness while expanding its reach. Concentrated chlorine gas was ignited by miniature nuclear bombs to quickly become hydrochloric acid in the clouds, then fall as radioactive rain to the surface. The chlorine that didn't transform immediately sank to the surface to choke everyone in a 10-kilometer radius. Meanwhile, the volatile compounds saturated the clouds, transforming into a variety of deadly substances and spreading across the landscape. Standard dilution measures might sterilize the air eventually, but not before they made things worse. Whatever the worth of OWS's cause, and whatever OWS's cause was, it could never justify indiscriminate killing of civilians. The people trying to make a go of it on New Marrakesh didn't deserve to die, and they absolutely didn't deserve to die in some of the most horrific ways imaginable. So on hearing a strike against the terrorist headquarters was in the works, David reported to the briefing room of the EAS Brisbane, displaying a level of enthusiasm he hadn't felt of late. Not since the confrontation with Becker last month, anyway. He snagged a seat next to the captain of his squad, Antonio Cassano. "What's the word, Captain?" Cassano smirked. "Wordies? We've got them." Commander Becker cleared his throat loudly from the front of the room. "Marines, pay attention. EAMI agents have located a compound on Radavi, believed to be the headquarters for the One World Separatists. Reconnaissance has captured the following visuals of the site." The screen behind Becker displayed a cluster of warehouse-style buildings on the outskirts of a town. "This central building is thought to be the command center. The structure surrounding it houses supplies, bunks, and ancillary supplies. This building," Becker indicated the largest structure located off to the side from the main cluster, "is a chemical factory. It is operational." Someone in the back of the room leapt to their feet. "They're planning to hit other colonies?" "Sit down, cadet. Evidence suggests they are, yes. The suspected leader of OWS, Ganner Tai, arrived at the compound this morning. Most of his senior advisors are also in residence today, putting a total of 31 individuals on site. We will arrive at Radavi in 2 hours. An aerial strike is apt to ignite the volatile chemicals present in the factory and put the nearby civilian settlement at risk. Therefore, our mission is to infiltrate the compound, secure the factory, and kill or capture Ganner Tai as well as all other persons present on the compound." Becker entered a command on his control panel. "Your assignments are out to you now. Meet in the designated rooms for squad briefings in 10 minutes. We are boots on the ground in 2.5 hours. David opened the incoming assignment file in EVI, scanned it, and groaned. If Becker wanted to keep punishing him with crap assignments until this rotation ended, there wasn't a blasted thing he could do about it. But sidelining him on a mission where success truly mattered? If people died while David was left twiddling his thumbs, words would be exchanged. Inevitably followed by another reprimand, possibly a suspension. Damn it. Radavi, Earth Alliance Colony, southeast quadrant of settled space. Dry wind swept dust across David's skin in waves of scorching pinpricks. The promotional brochures insisted Radavi wasn't a desert, merely arid. 2 minutes on the ground, he was of the firm opinion that the sales pitch was Chush Sobachya. A blinking green dot on one of his 2 Whisper virtual screens marked the location of his contact from military intelligence. His eyes sought and found the location on the terrain, 70 meters ahead to the northwest, in a gully rimmed by plants that were definitely not cacti, because if they were cacti, this would be a desert. In the valley to his left, the OWS compound bustled with furtive activity amid the encroaching shadows of dusk. The functionality of his cloaking shield didn't merit the term invisibility, but when tuned to the, wait for it, desert setting, he was confident it kept him from being seen from the valley or picked up by sensors. He moved carefully through the scrub grass toward the marked location. When he was 10 meters out, he sent his contact a heads-up of his imminent arrival, so nobody got shot or stabbed. A few seconds later, he dropped to his stomach and shimmied in beside the man, who lay prone on the high point of the step. He offered a hand. "Lieutenant David Solovy." The man studied one of 3 tiny hollows arrayed in an arc in front of him while he absently extended a hand out to David. "Lieutenant Richard Navick, since I do what I'm told, I didn't question my CO, but now that you're here, I will question you. Why are you here?" David gave him a closed-mouthed smile. "To acquire the latest intel on the situation at this compound here and relay it to my superiors prior to them moving in." Navick shook his head. "I can relay the information to anyone who needs it. I have been relaying it to my CO all day. Do they not trust my reports?" I'm confident they do. It's not you. It's me. Navick grimaced. Is this a recon run or a breakup? David stifled a laugh on account of subterfuge. The former, I hope. No, the assignment is Commander Becker's way of punishing me today for a tiny insubordination incident last month, to be distinguished from his ways of punishing yesterday and the day before. Basically, I'm fucked for the remainder of my rotation. Alas, but let's get this done. Tell me, Lieutenant, what do you see? A hornet's nest of complications for our people. He flicked one of the hollows and the image shifted. The biggest problem is that the chemical factory is rigged with explosives and, though I haven't been able to put eyes on it, I suspect Ganner Tai is carrying the trigger in his pocket. That is a problem. Yes. We've also got 4 guards outside the factory, 8 patrolling the compound perimeter, and 6 on the command center. All armed with TSGs, sporting black market mods. Everyone inside is armed, but only with daemons, which is better. The building on the far southwest is the armory, so it will need to be blocked off first thing. Ty's office is 2/3 of the way through the command center. Our people can expect a gauntlet of close combat to reach him. Fabulous. Well, let me put my extensive Special Forces training and experience to use and pass the information along to Becker. He did exactly that, then watched the resulting orders roll out to the infiltration squads on his second whisper screen. Can you pipe the feed from the cam you've got tailing Ty into the mission channel? A stealthed drone is going to drop targeted munitions directly above his office or, alternatively, wherever he happens to be when the infiltration squads are ready to move in. Navick punched in a few commands on the panel lying in front of him. Done. I hope the drone is precise and the munitions powerful. You and me both. Chemical burns are not on my social calendar for this week. Silence fell for a moment, so David motioned to the hollows. Are all those coming from bot cams? Navick nodded, reaching to his right and retrieving something from his pack. He opened his palm to reveal an orb 4 centimeters in diameter. He tapped on it, and it vanished behind a faint shimmer, no more noticeable than a heat shimmer, even from less than a meter away. Nice. They are handy. They can be actively controlled, set to a pattern or tagged to a marker, including particular thermal signatures, bodies, usually. An internal power source keeps them running for up to 3 weeks at a time with constant video and audio transmission. I've got 4 of them roaming the grounds, 1 inside the factory and 2 inside the command center. Smooth work. David glanced around, tweaking the near-infrared filter on his ocular implant to compensate for the deepening shadows as night descended. And you've been lying here watching their feeds for, what, 10 hours? Navick cracked his neck and massaged a shoulder. Try 18. Damn. I hesitate to ask, but if they transmit their feeds to remote receivers, can't they transmit them somewhere else? Why are you here? Official guidelines about hum-int, backing up automated intel whenever possible. And to be fair, I've had to modify their parameters a couple of times based on activity in the compound. Yes, it's grunt work, but it's probably necessary grunt work. As opposed to my grunt work? Navick tilted his head in concession. Chatter erupted on the mission channel, and David perked up, his gaze instinctively scanning the horizon. The infiltration squads are moving in. Can you get a cam on the northwest perimeter? I can do better. Navick produced a scope and zoomed in to the northwest. David scooted closer to be able to see the scope's screen. When their shoulders touched, he peered over at Navick. You're not going to try to kiss me, are you? Nope, you're not my type. David frowned. It had been quite subtle, but the lieutenant had cased him on his arrival, and not for potential threats. Are you sure? I am. But you're far too gregarious and I suspect inherently arrogant. Also Russian. I mean, how have you not lost that accent yet? Give you a little time and you'll doubtless turn out to be a showboat or two. David frowned. I won't dispute the criticisms, but what you don't know is that I am also a fantastic cook, My mother taught me everything her mother knew, and I've been told on multiple occasions that I have seductive eyes. Oh, dear Lord, you can stop now. I also, please don't tell me you're also. David worked to keep a straight face. Fine, consider me put in my place. Good, because the fireworks are about to start. Instantly on alert, he watched the scope screen as a dozen figures advanced toward the south facade of the command center from the west. They neared to 20 meters. Ties on the move. An explosion rocked the east third of the building. Flames and debris exploded outward, then collapsed in a concave arc as the roof crumbled. The Marines fanned out and rushed forward to infiltrate the structure. Navick tracked movement on one of the hollows, zooming in as close as the visual allowed. A figure moved slowly, possibly limping, down a hallway into a larger room. The strike missed Ty, at least partially. Sheet. David accessed the mission channel. Commander, Target 1 is still active. I repeat, Target 1 is still active and on the move. Commander Becker, mission. Copy that. Drone is tracking and... Laser fire erupted on the south side of the command center from both directions. Captain Cassano, mission. Turret fire on the perimeter. Take cover. Cadet Rove, mission. I'm hit. Commander Becker, mission. Retasking drone to disable turrets. Screams filled the gaps in weapons fire to permeate the air. Christ, they're getting torn apart. Where the hell did the turrets come from? Navick frantically adjusted cam angles. It looks as if they must have been buried underground, shielded by dampeners so we wouldn't detect them. Smaller explosions plumed as the drone fired on the turrets. On the mission comm, calls for help overlapped one another. We have to help them. David unlatched his daemon and engaged the augmented barrel extension, braced on his elbows, and sighted down in search of a target. Navick's hand landed on his arm. You'll alert them to our location. Not in this chaos. But he hesitated. Did it matter if the enemy knew where they were? They had the height advantage and could pick off advancing attackers without difficulty, unless they were going to do something crazy to salvage the operation. He laid the weapon down and studied the scene. The crisscrossing fire died off as the drone succeeded in taking out the active turrets and adopted a defensive posture facing the command center, protecting the Marines. Several guards rushed outward to continue the counterattack, then were driven inside when the drone opened fire on them. Captain Cassano, mission. We've got 4 people down and 5 injured. We've retreated to defensible positions, but I don't know how long they'll stay that way. Orders, Commander. Commander Becker, mission. We can't let this opportunity to take out OWS slip away. Hold for reinforcements. From the Brisbane? It would take 20 minutes at a minimum for a new squad to reach the compound, during which time Ty's people could maneuver around the drone's envelope and start picking off the pinned-down Marines. Plus, if they had hidden turrets, what else did they have? David breathed out through his nose. Ty still on the grid? Him and 3 of his people are moving around the interior. I assume he deduced he was being tracked and is trying to make that harder. All right, the fact he didn't blow the chemical factory when the attack began means he doesn't want to blow the chemical factory. He thinks he can survive this, escape and even salvage some materials before the cavalry arrives to obliterate this place. I see one of 3 scenarios playing out here. 1, the reinforcements from the Brisbane get inside and corner Ty, and he blows the factory when they breach his bunker of choice. 2, OWS takes out our people on the ground before the reinforcements arrive, then a new firefight erupts throughout the compound when they do arrive. If our people win, we're back to the first scenario. 3, Ty and his people escape before the reinforcements arrive. None of those scenarios have us winning. They do not, which is why we need to make a 4th scenario happen. To start, we need to disable the remote detonation connection to the explosives rigged in the factory. Navick didn't respond, and after a few seconds, David looked over, eyebrow raised. Well, I'm thinking. Think faster. Navick shot him a glare, but it faded as his lips pursed. You need to get inside the factory. If I can see the circuit flow, I can tell you how to disable the signal receiver. David contemplated the large building down the hill. I've got stealth, but we need to distract the guards out front briefly. Assume for now we can make that happen. What do I do once I'm inside? David crept toward the chemical factory, shrouded in a cloaking shield cranked up to full. Distant sounds marked the standoff on the other side of the command center, but here there was only eerie silence. Richard, your CO gave you the go-ahead for this? David, I didn't exactly clear it through Becker. If I told him the plan, he'd order me to stay put and wait for the reinforcements. But the way I see it, I can't disobey orders if I don't have any. Richard, it's your career. David, so far, here goes. 15 meters from the factory entrance, he palmed one of the grenades he'd brought, cocked his arm back, and let it sail. It landed well past the 2 guards posted at the entrance and bounced off the facade of a nearby building. The next instant, it detonated, tearing through the walls and igniting whatever was stored in it. The guards jumped, then almost fucked up the whole thing by being unable to decide whether they should run toward the explosion or away from it. They finally opted for a third tactic, running parallel to the explosion like they intended to root out the perpetrators. David sprinted lightly for the entrance and slipped inside, holding the door open an extra second to make certain the cloaked cambot accompanying him made it in as well. The locations of the 4 explosive packages were marked on his whisper, and he skulked along the right interior wall until he reached the first one. In a minor boon, no human laborers worked on the lines, though the lines were running. Just below eye level, he found a bulky rectangular module mounted on the wall. A smaller module was attached to it. I'm at the first explosive. Richard, slice the cover off the smaller module, no more than a centimeter deep. David unsheathed his kinetic blade and activated it, slicing into the metal as fast as he dared. The front cover fell into his waiting hand, and he stuck it in a pocket of his tactical vest. What now? Richard, 1 second. See the square bundle at the injunction of 3 fiber lines? Stab it. David, stab it? Richard, yes, with the tip of your blade. Skewer it. David's face screwed up. You got it. He positioned the tip of his blade in front of the bundle of circuitry and jabbed it forward. He waited, but he didn't get so much as a sizzle. Nothing happened. Richard, yes it did. Get to the next explosive and do the same thing to it. David moved swiftly once he knew what he was searching for and what to do with it, and in less than 2 minutes he'd skewered the final explosives package. Done. What's the guard status? Richard, turning back your way now. Hurry and you can make it out before they come in sight of the door. David sprinted for the entry and outside, taking a hard left toward Navick's perch on the hill above. I owe you a beer, Lieutenant. As soon as I get to a safe distance, I'll inform Becker the drone can pepper the command center at its leisure without worrying about tie blowing. A massive explosion lit the sky to daylight, and he rushed for the retreating shadows. The hell was that? Commander Becker, mission. Report! Commander Cassano, mission. SAL on the roof took out the drone. David's shoulders sagged. Well, shit. David, drone's down, time for new plan. Richard, now that Ty can't set off the explosives, maybe you ought to wait on the reinforcements. David, negative. Now they can fan out and search for the holed-up Marines. They've got a SAL on the roof, which means they can take out our people en masse when they find them. Get a cambot on the roof, please. Lieutenant Solovy, mission. Alpha and Bravo squads, you need to find new cover right now, and find it quietly. I'm coming to you, so kindly don't shoot me. Commander Becker, mission. Solovy, return to your post. David sighed. So much for not disobeying orders. Lieutenant Solovy, mission. Commander, Lieutenant Navick will relay intel on the rooftop SAL activity to you and Alpha and Bravo squads. Mendoza, if you can use the cam feed to target the SAL's wielder and get a shot, do it. Becker continued to bark protests at him and instructions at the others, but David tuned them out to concentrate on avoiding detection as he crossed the breadth of the compound toward the scene of the initial ambush. Cassano relayed the squad's new location to him on the sly, and he slipped past the rear facade of one of the ancillary buildings to reach them. What was left of them, anyway. Near as he could tell, only 2 Marines were free of serious injury, and they did not include his captain. He crouched beside Cassano. "You guys are a sorry lot." Cassano had a death grip on a med wrap held over a thigh wound. Yeah, we got our asses kicked. What's your excuse?" "I was working on my tan. Did the remote detonation bombs make it here?" Cassano winced and tilted his head in the direction of one of the other Marines propped against the exterior wall. "Giano's got them." "What are you planning?" "To finish the mission. Hang in there." He clapped his captain's shoulder and moved to where Cassano had gestured. Captain Eleni Giano and 3 members of her unit had joined the Brisbane a week earlier to bulk up the Marine Tactical Detachment, and he'd never worked with her. But there were no strangers in a foxhole, as it were, so he skipped the introductions to kneel beside her. A full roll's worth of med wraps wound around her upper arm, shoulder, and across her neck. He didn't want to guess at the extent of her injuries. "I need your bombs and the trigger signal." She nudged the pack beside her over to him. "Coverage is 28 square meters per. There are 8 in the pack, more than enough for the whole building. Stick them, toss them, it doesn't matter. They're fairly stable, so don't throw them in a fire or one of the chemical vats, and they won't detonate prematurely. The trigger signal is FK41B, and on a 52 megahertz wave." "Understood. Thanks." She jerked a sharp nod despite her injuries, and he stood and slung the pack on his back. "Take us with you." He pivoted to Mendoza, who stood next to one of Giano's men. "You have grenades?" "4 of 'em." David reached in his pack and retrieved a grenade. "Now you have 5. Mendoza, get on your rifle and take out that SAL on the roof. When the terrorists come for this location, light them up with grenades. I'm counting on you to protect your injured squad mates." Mendoza frowned, then straightened up and saluted. "Yes, sir." Behind him, Cassano grumbled under his breath. "The commander is yelling at me to stop you from doing something stupid. I explained to him that the restraints we brought for the terrorists were lying in tatters 40 meters away next to Ovale's body, and since I couldn't walk, I lack the ability to physically keep you here. Don't make me regret it." "No promises, Captain." David reactivated his cloaking shield and headed for the command center. David. "Navick, you've got to be my eyes now. You and the Cambot. I've named him Yevgeny." Richard. "You can tell me why over that beer." David. "Sounds good." He palmed his now sole grenade and studied the main entrance, where 3 guards paced in agitation and whispered to one another in hushed shouts. He figured they were trying to decide if they should go in search of the Marines so the SAL could take them out, but were worried what the infiltrators might have up their sleeves. He readied himself and lobbed the grenade at the front door. Bodies went flying in the wake of the detonation, and he took off running through the chaos. The grenade had ripped apart the doorframe, so he hopped over the burning debris and inside, then veered right. He stopped long enough to remove 2 of the remote bombs from the pack and stuff them in an open pocket before continuing on. Richard. 2 guards in the room on your left. Arguing, it appears. Seemed it was a theme. Amateurs. David. Excellent. They'll be distracted. Blade in one hand and Damon in the other, he sneaked into the dimly lit room and closed on the nearest of the 2 guards. His blade hand wrapped around the man's neck and sliced across it while his gun hand extended over the man's shoulder to shoot the other guard in the face. If the target wore a defensive shield, it buckled under the point-blank force, and the man's face, well, David was glad the room was dimly lit for more than one reason. He dropped a bomb in the corner, checked the hall, though Navick would have alerted him if it was occupied, and continued on. Richard. Lots of utility rooms on this hall. Take the next left to reach the heart of the building. First open room is a dining and break room. One person is in there gathering up water packets into a satchel. David. They're getting ready to make a run for it. Richard. Looks like. When he reached the break room, he leaned inside, shot the man in the base of the neck, and kept moving. Richard. 20 meters ahead, take another left. Then the second right is the room Ty and 3 others are holed up in at present. David. Got it. Richard. Did you hear the part about there being 4 of them? David. I did, but it's a small room, right? Richard. Relatively. David. Perfect. Something slammed into him from behind and sent him sprawling to the floor. A body-sized mass landed on top of him. The glimmer of a gamma blade flashed in his peripheral vision. He threw all his weight into shoving his shoulder up and back, knocking the attacker off balance. It bought him a bit of space, which he used to wrench his left arm around and open fire. Blood splattered on him as he shoved the faint outline of a cloaked body backwards. When it ceased fighting him, he flipped it on its stomach and felt around the waistband for the shield module. He removed it and tossed it down the hall, and a bloodied, now dead terrorist revealed itself. Richard. What happened? David. I hate to break it to you, but some of the terrorists have cloaking shields. Richard. Crap. The thermal seekers won't pick them up unless the bot is practically on top of them. David. It's fine. I've got this. Ahead and left, second right. He leaned against the wall long enough to catch his breath, dropped a bomb on the floor and pressed on, with renewed attention to his surroundings after the unexpected melee. He didn't actually intend on bursting into the room and opening fire on 4 people, not when he had bombs which could do a far more thorough job of dismembering them. He worked his way down the hall in question to silently approach the door. He stuck a bomb to the right side of it, then to the left. 2 additional bombs he designated for the rear section of the building, and he should have full coverage. This time he heard the telltale scuffle of an advancing attacker. Again, he wanted to call them amateurs. Stealth was about more than a cloaking shield, but he reminded himself that the amateurs had slaughtered 64,000 innocent civilians and counting. He spun and painted the hallway in laser fire. A single retaliatory shot sailed past his head, followed by the thud of a body hitting the floor. He didn't stop to check this one, because he was running out of time. If they didn't already know, the noise would have alerted the principals that an intruder was running loose in their building. They'd come after him in force or, worse, accelerate their schedule and flee before he could detonate the bombs. He tossed a bomb through an open door. 1 to go. Richard. 2 guards ahead to your right, between you and the rear exit. He pressed himself against the wall and peeked around the next corner. The hall opened up into a small entryway where 2 men stood, guns at the ready. The distance between him and the targets was such that if they wore defensive shields, the initial fire might not take them out. Damn it. He shouldn't have given up his other grenade to Mendoza. He readied his blade and kicked the wall. A beat later, one of the men rounded the corner. David knifed him in the gut and drove him forward, straight into his partner, who was advancing behind him. The 3 of them crashed into the opposite wall, all flailing limbs and waving weapons. Richard, you've got a 3rd guard coming up behind you from the exit. David managed to wrench his blade through the man's stomach, and he quit struggling. Behind him, the 2nd man's gaze locked on David. In one motion, David let go of the blade, dropped the body between them, swept his daemon up and fired into the man's chest as the man's gun arm swung around. The man's gaze went blank as he slid down the wall. A thud resounded behind David, and he whirled around to the exit, weapon still raised. Navick stood in the doorway behind another body crumpled on the floor, a daemon resting at his side, and 2 hollows floating on either side of his face. He shrugged. I decided I wasn't doing much good acting as your eyes if I couldn't see half the threats. Thought I should come and help. David chuckled raggedly. You thought right. Thanks. He reached in his pocket, retrieved the last bomb, and stuck it on the interior wall by the door. Let's get out of here and blow this place. Music to my ears. They cleared the area beyond the exit and headed for their former vantage on the hill. Uh-oh, Ty and company are now on the move. They're coming our way, or the exit's way. The enemy was about to slip the net. David glanced behind him. They'd covered 30 meters from the building. Run! Navick didn't hesitate, and they sprinted toward the outskirts of the compound. 3 strides later, they sent the detonation signal. The shockwave hit his back like a rocket-propelled furnace blast. Then he was airborne. Then the ground was above him. He tucked his body in and landed on his shoulder in a dreadful show of a combat roll. After blinking woozily a few times, he painfully wrenched his neck up to survey the scene. The entire command center and several of the surrounding buildings were engulfed in flames, their facades breaking apart and collapsing into rubble. Navick, over here. The pained response had come from his left. David pushed up onto his elbows and used his forearms to crawl over to his new friend. One of Navick's pants legs smoldered, and a cut on his forehead seeped blood, but he looked okay, all things considered. "You good?" Navick waved a hand in David's general direction. "I'm good, but it's 2 beers." "What?" "You owe me 2 beers." David nodded in weary agreement as the mission comm channel announced the arrival of the reinforcements. "Oh, and by the way, it's nice to meet you."